observing the non-pharmaceutical protocols of COVID, so most of us are wearing masks, and majority of us are pretty much vaccinated. Don't worry, I know it's a net, but I do it so that you remember. For those of us who are in the venue, we're going to ask you that you continue to keep your masks on and you indulge us in that case. Thank you once again. I think this is probably our 5th or 4th installment since we started in partnership with National Mentorship Movement and All Mutual. And in our early stages of having live events again, I was speaking to Talfa earlier on, and he says he hasn't been here since COVID. So it's good to see you again, my brother. But we continue with our mentorship program. As you know, we've partnered with Black Management Forum and other organizations in the country to do the mentorships, and we're getting our mentors and mentees, and we're currently busy partnering with them. If you'd like to be a mentor, there's a QR code which is on the screen now. I advise you that you take a picture of it. Otherwise, we will keep it on the screen at the end of the event, and you can do that. And please join. Everyone has got something to give. And it's like a dating app, except that it matches a mentee and a mentor, okay? And if you don't understand a bit about it, Rosa, if I can ask you to stand, and Talfa, please stand. They'll tell you a little bit more about it, including our team, Patsepo and everyone, and myself, I'll be available. So, we also do this at the start so that we can give people a little bit more time to arrive. And I see that the venue is already getting packed and my wife is not here, so someone please make let's make sure we get some more chairs without infringing on the protocols which we had been given. As Babkhateb and I reflect about the years of this journey, having been 12 years, and what we've seen here, there's the beautiful lady, so she can find a spot. We try and find out what is it that we haven't done, what is it we can do differently, and who is it that we haven't had an opportunity to hear from. And today I think we have people that are new to the ULP stage, but people that both Babkhateb and I and the ULP team, including the NMM and All Mutual, felt that it would really be a great conversation if we can have here. So if you can, please give hands to our panel before they even start. We don't pay these people, so it is their time that they're giving, and we appreciate it, and we are forever indebted to you for coming. My job is easy. My job is one to introduce a Soweto boy who's an Orlando Pirates fan. So he's Soweto, Orlando Pirates, and the rest comes after that. Okay. So if you live here and you say, who was the person facilitating, just say some guy who's a Pirates fan and he's an Orlando Pirates and he comes from Soweto. But Milton Nkosi is an award-winning journalist and a media thought leader. He joined the BBC in the late 80s, just before Nelson Mandela was released, and he covered that. I saw him as a young man there. He was much sexier than he looks now, but he was there. He retired in 2020 as an Africa Bureau analyst and a correspondent after 30 years of career, during which he has been based in the UK and in Delhi in India as Southern Asia Bureau editor, and prior to that he was BBC News head of Africa in his role as Africa Bureau chief. He is also a senior research fellow at Africa-Asia Dialogue. And like I said last time, he's got a lot of fascinating stories. One of the things we say in ULP, I think one of those posters says focus, focus, focus on it. That means if you do something, you focus and you make sure you become the best at it. So as I was reading this, and it says correspondent, he retired after 30 years of service. I thought of our camera lady here, Palesa. Palesa, stand up, my beautiful sister, please. She was born in 1997, so she was nowhere close to being a thought. Without any further ado, Melton, over to you, my brother, please.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here. It's a little bit nippy. I see a few jumpers. I think the masks helps a little bit with the warmth, although sometimes it can be a bit cumbersome. But it's good to be back here, and it's great to be here on a Wednesday evening. Normally we're here on Thursdays. So the brain sort of, gets a bit fuzzy, especially when you get to that traffic light that is not working there up the road. I'm so grateful, Theo, for your introduction. Please ignore everything he said. It's all an exaggeration. The only true part is that I do honestly, genuinely, without any embarrassment, support Orlando Pirates. And I would love you to support us too, if you can. Tonight is great to have our panelists who are leaders in their own right. They've got quite a lot on their track record, for which we are all proud, because when we see our own at the top, we all feel proud. We feel represented at the top table when we see you up there. So their resumes are quite long, and because we want to hear more from them on the record about how their journey of leadership brought them to where they are, we generally just give you a snippet of it. So if you want more about Wendy Luhabe, sitting to my left, who is beautiful, regal, and powerful in that chair, and to Ntate Tshokolo Nchocho, who is also known as TP. Now, I'll read his bio, and just listen to this. We don't do ladies first here. We are so feminist, we've gone the other way around. We don't want cliches. We support women just ordinarily without following any cliches. Mr. Tshokolo Petrus Nchocho, you can see him there, he's handsome, short hair like me, good. Also known as TP, as I just said, is Chief Executive Officer of the Industrial Development Corporation, better known as IDC to you. He assumed this role on the 1st of January in 2019. He has over 20 years of experience in economic development, finance, and banking area. We're talking big fish here, guys. Prior to joining the IDC, he was CEO of the Land and Agricultural Development Bank, better known as the Land Bank, a position he held since February 2015. Mr. Nchocho's career in economic development, finance, and banking spans over 20 years, having previously served as a group executive at the Development Bank of South Africa, DBSA, a portfolio which saw him manage the DBSA's infrastructure project, finance, debt, and equity investments. He holds a BCom degree from the University of the North, a Master of Business Leadership, MBL, from UNISA School of Business, an MSc Finance, University of London, UK, as well as an Advanced Management Program, AMP, obtained from Harvard University. His passion for socio-economic development has seen him serve on boards of some community-based organizations, including YES, which is short for Youth Enterprise Society, which is a non-governmental organization based in Harrismith in the Free State. At YES, he volunteered business advisory services to young entrepreneurs. He also served on the board of Yeast Housing Company, an inner city housing Section 21 company operating in central Pretoria or Tshwane. Ladies and gentlemen, TP Nchocho. Now, to my left, Wendy Luhabe is one of South Africa's many luminary women of many facets as a pioneer in social entrepreneurship, women empowerment, mentorship of younger generations, and in South Africa's boardrooms for 30 years. She has been a non-executive director and chair in diverse industries that span technology, industrial development, luxury goods, fast-moving consumer goods, and retail. She has broken new ground many times with remarkable achievements in the private, public, academic, and not-for-profit sectors. Her vast leadership experience and commitment to excellence is admirable, to say the least. You should be clapping by this point. In 2021, Wendy became PEPCO's first female chair, and in 2018, she was appointed as chair of Lipstar, a leading private label manufacturer. Her previous positions as chair include Vodacom, Industrial Development Corporation. Hey, church, yeah, oh. Yes. International Marketing Council of South Africa, and as Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg. She is a recipient of many awards. Now you're in the zone. That's good. She is a recipient of many awards, including 4 honorary doctorates for her pioneering contributions to the economic empowerment of women in South Africa. Wendy is a Christian, married, and has 3 grandchildren who are the love of her life. So, Wendy, welcome. It's good to be sitting next to you. It's good to see you today in high spirits.
It's embarrassing to listen to your CVs being read.
Yeah.
It is,
Yeah,
we need to skip that part.
It's always awkward when people talk about you in front of you. You know. Normally we do it when they're in coffins. Not here. Here we praise you when you're still here with us. So, Wendy, my first question. We start from the beginning. You were born in Benoni and later moved to Davidton, or Benoni, which was called Actonville. I don't know if Actonville still exists, but it changed from there. Family of 4, 1 brother and 3 sisters. Parents were both professionals. Your mom, a qualified nursing sister, and your father, an administrator. Because you lived next to the airport, you had a dream of becoming a pilot, inspired by the planes around you. Where did it go from there?
Where did it go from there? Not sure how to answer that question. I guess being a victim, if I can use that word, of being forcibly removed from a home where you were born into, which was a proper home. This was before the matchbox houses came into being. My early memory of growing up was a home that had a big tree, peach tree, with a walk underneath that had chicken. So we used to have our own eggs. We would go into the walk to get the eggs. From there, we would climb up the tree to pick up the peaches when they were ripe, and we would use the tree to hide from our parents when we didn't want to do any chores. And my mother used to ride a bicycle to go and deliver babies. And I have this fond memory of her with her bicycle and her delivery bag at the back when women had babies at home. And those are some of the early memories that shaped me. And I think my first experience of the brutality of the apartheid system was being removed from our home, forcibly being removed. We didn't have a choice about that. And moving into an entirely new environment that we didn't really choose, that we were thrust into. And moving from a home that was quite spacious, that had those days having a home that had a veranda, a stoop, was like highly prized. And moving into a matchbox house that had a toilet outside, one tree in front, 4 rooms, was probably what began to plant seeds of how I would revenge the system at some point. And just the experience of the hardship that we had to endure as young children, changing schools, having to make new friends and learning skills to adapt to the unexpected in life. I think all of those experiences have shaped who I developed to become. And over time and many experiences that I will spare you, really strengthened the resolve in me to defy what the system intended for me to achieve with my life. And made a very conscious decision that I would be who I want to be, not who the system wants me to be. And that really shaped the choices that I made, the education that I was blessed enough to have, because during those years, having university education was a privilege. I think it still is for a lot of people who come from rural areas, from townships, from many places where we live. And it's a privilege that we should never underestimate, and we should never take for granted. Because as Madiba has been quoted many times to have said, it really is the key and the weapon that people who are products of an oppressed system have to unlock opportunities for themselves. And to see the responsibility that we carry as midwives to pass on knowledge to others, and I have great admiration for what ULP has accomplished, and just even its existence. And I like the idea of it being a movement, not just an initiative, but a movement that can pass on from generation to generation. So we need to see ourselves as midwives who have a responsibility to pass on our experience to others, to pass on the knowledge that we have, to create opportunities for people, to mentor, to enable as many people as possible to make the most of their lives, to believe in themselves, and not to compare ourselves with each other, because we all have our own gifts. Each one of us have different talents, so what I've achieved, you may not be able to achieve, but you can achieve something much better that is more suited to who you are. I always tell young people who say they want to be like me to say, no, you don't want to be like me. You want to be the best person that you can be. And that really should be the guiding principle of our lives. Discovering what our gifts are, what our talents are, and finding the support that we need to be the best person that we can be, whether it's through a mentor, through reading of books, through conversations with people who have walked the path that we may be considering, but to recognize that nobody owes us anything. We have the responsibility to make the most of our lives because we already have the ingredients. The basic ingredients to do that exist. All we need to do is to leverage them and to figure out how to make the best of the gifts that we already carry within us. God doesn't create us in His image and not give us the gifts that we need to be in this life. And that's something that no one should ever take away from us. So it's a long way of answering a question of where did it all start.
It's a beautiful way of starting, actually. It's so captivating. I'll come back to you about some of the work you've done to follow on this idea of mentorship and sharing with young people, which is a brilliant thing that is happening here at ULP. TP, if I may, if you don't mind. Turn off the lights. I shouldn't say that, then suddenly we have load shedding.
Well, I don't think this generation knows Teddy Pendergrass. I think that's more our generation.
So, TP, you were born on a small farm in a mining town of Virginia in the Free State. The village was known as Tshokolo as well. And at the age of 8, your family relocated to Tshokolo, which is also known as Kwaku. You come from a family of 8, youngest of the 6 boys. And all your brothers worked in mining, in the mining industry. And you first registered for a BSc degree, trying to follow their footsteps. But in second year, you changed to BCom. Tell us why.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Morris. And it's an enormously great honor for me to be here. A boy from the village in Kwaku. To be sitting here, and I was listening very carefully to Wendy, Luhabe, and I hope that one day I can come 1% close to what she has accomplished in her life. I would be grateful if I would. So, thank you so much for in Sesotho ba re batho ke masupatsela, those who paved the way. Thank you for paving the way. Yes, I was born just outside Virginia, 10 kilometers outside Virginia as you drive towards Bloemfontein on a farm. Last born of 8, as you say. So I grew up on a farm. Absolute slave conditions, if you think about it. Those mud houses that our mothers would deal and then paint with colors during Christmas. So that's where I grew up. On the 20th of June, I was born there. 20th of June, 1967. It was in the middle of winter. Born at home, no hospital, there's no ambulance to come and pick you up or something like that. And my mother tells me that it was so cold, I actually nearly died because It was extremely cold. There are no stoves. You know, they cook using imbaula and the smoke and things like that. But you know, the one thing I've learned is, you know, life evolves and it goes on. And so I didn't die. I'm here. I'm alive. And my early memories with my mother, I'll talk about him a lot because our family was a classic black family where dad woke up very early, disappeared to work, came back late, tired, and the person that we really spent a lot of time with was my mother. And my early memories was we are of the Methodist church, and so my mother used to be one of those mama wemtandas with the red thing. And so my early memories are with me walking by her side, you know, young man. Everywhere she went with me. But yeah, let's leave that. So I think the one thing that happened was that because all my brothers worked at the mines in Virginia and in Velcom, Harmony and Stein and those gold mines there, when we went to Kwakwa, I don't know if there was a family decision, but I think somehow, even if it wasn't discussed, but there was a conscious decision that I was going to be assisted to a different pathway. And the one thing which, by God's grace, I had, and I'm sure many have here, is that academically I was very good. I always was, you know, top of class and things like that. So somehow I think there was this thing that no, this one won't go to the mines. He must be a doctor or a teacher or something like that. Yeah. So I studied, and then yes, I went to the University of the North, and the only reason why I took a BSc, and it was a BSc with an education, it was because the bursaries were available and easy to access. So you pitch up on campus and they say, yeah, now what do you want to do? The bursaries or BSc, they used to call it BSc Pedagogics, BSc Ped education. So I studied the chemistry and this biology and other things. So, but around campus you start talking, and you get, you know, to interact with guys from Soweto, you know, smarter guys. Where now you are a guy from the village, and you start talking about industry, and you read, and I said, no, man. But I think at the back of my mind, BSc was like, I was hoping that I could take the credits to go to med school, you know. Either go to Medunsa or Wentworth, which were prominent schools for medicine for black doctors at the time. But somehow, I said, nah, there's this thing called industry, you know, banking or retail or something, and companies that we used to read about, Sasol and this Sanlam and so on. Oh, okay, it means I have to do something different. And on campus, there was someone, although I didn't discuss it with him, we later talked about it. He turned to be a good friend, a mentor, someone that I look up to. There was a teacher there who was teaching mathematics and statistics. And I remember when I went to change the course, he was laughing because he has this infectious laughter. His name is Fani Titi. Yeah, so he comes from that side of town, Kwakwa. He had just completed honors, I think, from Fort Hare, and he was teaching maths at the University of the North, the campus there in Kwakwa. But yeah, long story short, we passed, and then we were lucky. At that time, it was relatively easy to find jobs. So when I finished first year, good marks. During those days, companies would come to campus and say, hey, students who have performed well, here are bursaries and so on and so on. And one of those companies was the Development Corporation in Kwaku, which was called Kwaku Development Corporation. They offered me a bursary, so I became better, financially in terms of all that and all that. And so when I completed school in 1990, I was then offered to go and work at the Development Corporation. And there, the first person that I met and who had a life-changing impact on my life in terms of just the way he embraced us as people who were just young kids who didn't know how to do work. And the way he talked, the extent to which he was at the time, and I think he's still able to now, to talk in a way that builds confidence, that stirs you up to want to do more, was a gentleman by the name of Lazarus Zim. Yes. He was my first boss when I started working in 1990. And my life has never been the same since. Because he constantly planted this messages about look at your job as more than just a job. It's a calling to some cause, some bigger purpose. Take your work seriously, and diligence and quality build into what you do. Take pride in what you do. And yes, have a sense of aspiration that you'll not be there forever. Look forward to something more, and so on and so on. So that's where it all started, and then I've since progressed like that, and went to work in Bloemfontein, was studying at UNISA. I've always liked reading and academics and things like that. Maybe one of these days I'll go and teach at Wits Business School. So I did that, and then I also started. So yeah, I did the first master's degree, and then did another master's degree, and I've always said, and the thing about life is that there's a measure of competitiveness. There's a significant measure of competitiveness that comes with professional life. So I remember early on I said, no, but a BCom degree alone will not be enough. When I start moving around the circles in Johannesburg, it's not going to be enough. And so you upgrade yourself like that. So it has been an interesting journey, yeah.
I'm inspired already. This is fascinating. What a beautiful story. I had a lump in my throat when you were describing your birth and what your mom told you. It's very powerful. Sometimes people I don't know if people at IDC, when they see the CEO note saying, go do this, and they're like, this one, he doesn't know where we come from. They don't know where you come from, right? So it's very important that we all know each other's stories, so that there's so much experience and what is called a shared experience. Other people always think that they are the only ones who started life at the bottom, but actually the people who were at the top also started at the bottom. It's a very important dynamic I found when I was in leadership. People always thought that you're kind of born there, which was you always have to remind them where you come from yourself. So that's really powerful. But can I come?
It would be interesting to actually have CEOs tell their stories.
Yes.
To the organization. I think it would change the dynamics and perspective. I mean, if you shared your story with the IDC, for example, when you started. No, I'm saying if you did. I'm saying if you did, how that would really change a lot of things.
So, for instance, I think this is exactly what we're trying to achieve here, because we know there are people, and we welcome all those who are online with us. We're happy to have you, and we know that some of you are from IDC. And you are listening. You are listening to your boss's story. Okay, it's a very important point there. And thank you very much, Professor Khatebe. It's always good to have you here. You started this whole thing. It's quite special, this movement, and look at the amount of people who brave the cold of Midrand to be here. So thank you very much. And there's already a job application for business school. We're doing very well, not even halfway. CVs are flying all over the room. So this is good. Can I come back to you and just, I was fascinated by your journey to Forte and how 1976 sort of changed things for you and you ended up in Lesotho. Not only that, but it also changed the trajectory of your academic work.
So I was the first in my family to have university education. My elder sister followed in my mother's footsteps. My brother was the first to become an entrepreneur. And when I went to Forte, I was going to become a social worker, because that's what women did in the 70s. If you were fortunate enough to go to university, you studied social work or you became there were really very limited options of what women could do those days. You could be a nurse or a teacher or a social worker. I think that was about it. There weren't many other fields that women explored. And I guess the blessing for me was that 1976 happened, and we were disrupted for 2 years in a row. And I decided that having my education completed was far more important, that I would need that much more when we became a free country. And so I began to explore options of where else I could go so that I could continue with my education. And like you, TP, I ended up with BCom by accident, not because it was a well thought through choice. It was a function of limited options that the University of Lesotho offered. They didn't offer social sciences. And from what was available, I thought that doing a BCom would give me many options to choose from. And so that's how I ended up with a BCom. But when I started my entrepreneurial life, I then consciously blended the two, where I started with social work and my BCom education. And that's how I was more interested in social entrepreneurship.
And so you complete your university and you get into industry. And I'm fascinated, sorry, by the way, part of my research also comes from this book, which is Wendy's book called Defining Moments. So if you have a chance at Exclusive Books or any book retail store, please grab a copy. It is absolutely fascinating. It's so relevant now, probably better than it was when you wrote it in 2002. So thank you for this, it was fascinating. I couldn't find my copy at home, my study is a mess, and I had to rush to my brother's home to borrow it. So and to my surprise, it was a signed copy, and I thought, ooh, this man walks in high places. So, for which I was very proud, by the way, thank you. Modise, thank you. So I'm quite fascinated by the transition now into industry and mentorship, and how people who don't know you support you, just like you said, TP. You get into industry and people who have no idea, they're not your friends or relatives, and they just give you opportunity.
So the first thing I think to share is that when you break new ground, I was amongst the first generation of black women to qualify with commerce education. And when I came back to Johannesburg to look for work, I couldn't find work, which surprised me because I thought, surely with the commerce education companies should be lining up to offer me opportunities, but that was not the case. And it took me a year to find a job. And during that year, I have to say that I was both determined and disillusioned. Because again, I was confronted with the brutality of the apartheid system and how it, without any apology, was not prepared to offer opportunities to a young black woman who had a good qualification, I thought. And at the end, towards the end of the year, and I used to take a train from Davidton to Johannesburg, knocking at doors, going for interviews, going to recruitment agencies who felt I was overqualified for a black woman, and that the only opportunities that they could offer were opportunities for a matriculant. They just very blatantly disregarded that I had 4 years of university education. And that's why I was saying I was both determined and disillusioned at the same time. And by luck or by chance, I was introduced to Johan Rupert, who had just come back to the country and was involved in starting the Rand Merchant Bank. And in retrospect, I wish he had actually rather given me an opportunity in Rand Merchant Bank. And when he came back, he bought a cosmetics company. And someone introduced me to him, someone I had met in Lesotho from Ghana or somewhere in Africa. Introduced me to Johan because I told him that I had been looking for work for a year and I had not been successful. Johan offered me a position without an interview. He said, "What would you like to do?" I said, "I'm interested in marketing. And so I would like an opportunity in marketing." And those days, by the way, to remind you, black people who were employed in companies were employed as trainees. Yeah. And many never graduated from being trainees. They saw their white counterparts with the same level of education start as trainees, and they would bypass them and become managers and become executives. And that carried on, and that's why the book looks at the experiences of black executives in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. Because the executives who were the first generation in the 70s really share the stories of how they saw their white counterparts coming through the door, starting as trainees and passing them and leaving them as trainees. So that was the era where I started my career. So to be employed by someone I didn't know, who came from what at the time represented the system, and to give me an opportunity to build a career was for me inspirational. And it taught me about the importance of making opportunities available to people, and that we don't need to know them. That when people need opportunities and we're in a position to offer them, we should do that. Because that's our contribution. That's the legacy, in my view, that matters the most. That makes a difference. That even today, I meet people who remind me of how they posted a message in LinkedIn 20 years ago, and I agreed to meet them. But I don't recognize them, I don't remember the meeting. And they would say, I made the time, I gave them an hour, we had a conversation, and it changed their lives. And so mentoring doesn't really have to be formalized. Sometimes it's just making time available. It's responding to a request for someone who says, I'd like to meet you for coffee. And my view is if people find us and ask to meet us, we should make ourselves available. Because we don't know how that can change their life and your life. Because I don't see mentoring as something that I offer to someone else. I see it as an opportunity for an exchange.
Yeah.
That in that conversation, I'm as enriched as the other person gets enriched. So we shouldn't think of mentorship as I'm offering something that you lack. It's an exchange.
That's beautiful. And I read, ladies and gentlemen. I also read a lovely, and I think this is a teachable moment because I kind of liked the phrase that you are reported to have shared about meeting and working with Johan, who said, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. I kind of like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes people meet you and they kind of think they will see you again, because you were nice. And they kind of fumble a little and they're not really well prepared, and you just think, God, I made time for you. Let's get on with it, So you never get a second chance to make your first impression. So I love that very much, which you said you learned from Johan. TP, I'm back to you. Are you ready? I know you're doing quite a lot of work now at IDC, but I want to take you back to your old stomping ground at the Land Bank and the work you did there. I was quite fascinated by the amount of work that you covered, but I liked that that finance model, which is called, in your fancy language of finance, it's called something like bridge finance or blended financing. I liked the sort of that sort of innovation of trying to combine government grants and finance to help farmers. Just talk us through that, because there's quite a lot of innovation, ingenuity that actually carves your way and many other people's ways, all the way up to where you are now.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. I really have to reflect on what Wendy was saying about mentorship as that conversation. And I already mentioned that some of the words that a person like Lazarus Zem spoke with us when we were young, 23 years old, 24 years old, have stuck with us to today. And so, Wendy, you said, as they were reading your profile, that you're a Christian, and there is this thing about there is life and death in the words. Things we say can build or destroy people. Yeah. And so, before the Land Bank, I spent a long time at the Development Bank of Southern Africa. My boss there, the CEO, was Mandla Nchocho, and I still owe a lot to him. I worked hard. He recognized and promoted me very rapidly through the system. And when I was there, a couple of people that I, by God's grace, spent time with for the exchanges that Wendy was talking about. The former chairperson of Standard Bank, the old man, Fred Paswan, he would come, be in South Africa for a short while, and he would make time to spend with me 45 minutes, an hour, at the most. I still remember those moments vividly, downtown, when Standard Bank head office used to be. And the way I used to interact with him was, I don't know about you, Wendy, but I didn't carry problems to him. But I wanted to discuss concepts, I would pick up 2 or 3 things and suss him out on what do you think. I say, I'm struggling with this thing of accountability. You know, when you say you hold people accountable, it's like you want to fire them, you know. So what is this accountability thing? And he would sit there and he would reflect and we would talk and he would say things along the lines of, you know, accountability is not a bad word. It's, come to think about it, if you hold yourself accountable, it's basically asking of yourself to live up to what you promised yourself.
Yeah.
You're just asking yourself and calling yourself to say, you know what, I have made a particular commitment and I'm holding myself accountable. I'm asking of myself to live up to that promise. And in the same way, asking of someone else to live up to a promise that they voluntarily made. They signed up to say, I will do accounts. And if they don't, you say, but you made an undertaking. So holding a person accountable is asking them. So that, and then other people, as was said, you know, it's not like necessarily someone who's senior to you. It's someone who you work with along the way. And I was lucky to come across Mpoma Kwana, who's now chairman at Nedbank. Again, when I was still at the DBSA. And I mean, the one thing that I've taken out of Mpo, and I still spend time with him today, is his sense of temperament. He has this cool demeanor about himself. And one of the shortcomings that I had when I was still growing up, you know, when you are trying to succeed and you climb the career ladder, you can very easily fall into the trap of being insensitive. You want to be right all the time. And in a board meeting, you can rub board members the wrong way and scupper your career. Not that you shouldn't be honest, but you have to maintain a particular decorum, I would imagine. I hope Madam Wendy agree. So that was one of my early weaknesses as I was still growing up. So, yeah, no, you talk too much. Slow down, make a point, and you know. And so those are the kind of things. So I really valued that. And then the time that I spent at the Land Bank, the one person who had an enormous impact on me when I was at the Land Bank was one of the board members. May his soul rest in peace. He passed away as a result of COVID in late 2020. Professor Muhammad Karan. A Muslim guy, you wouldn't associate him with agriculture. He was a professor of agricultural economics at the University of Stellenbosch. Big beards, you know. When he starts speaking Afrikaans, you would swear it's an Afrikaner person. On the other side, you come out, it's an Indian guy. And when I joined the organization, he said something to me profound. He said, you know what, this battery of tests that we do when you get appointed, we discussed yours as the board of the Land Bank. And he said, what attracted us to you is that we have the impression that you are able to talk and choose words in such a way that you inspire and motivate people. You don't come across as a super taskmaster who will get results but with corpses, bodies on the ground. But you come across as you want to orchestrate people's efforts around a vision, around a cause, and so on and so on. And they said, that's why we thought you could be the CEO here. And so I spent time. So one of the things that we then identified very early on when I arrived there, when we were strategizing, to your question, was that I very soon discovered that the agricultural sector in South Africa was and continues to be extraordinarily polarized along racial lines. So when we arrived there, you had emerging farmers who are supported by government. They get given these farms, and then they are known to mess up the farms, and there's high failure rate and what have you. Then on the one hand, you have very successful white farmers and what. And even the white farming community, it's stratified. You have family-owned farms, individual families, they own farms, but you also have top-tier farmers whose businesses are very much corporatized. Yes, the board is still constituted with predominantly family members. You know, the father is the chairman of the board, the one son is a CA, the one son runs operations and so. So we then identified an opportunity and said, but what if we were to bridge the gap? And I remember I think one of your books is called Bridging the Gap, where I said, no, how about we bring the two worlds together? We run a focused program where we drive transformation. But in the one example, if I can make a tangible example, a huge citrus farmer in the Western Cape. Not only do they have land in the Western Cape, but they also have land in parts of the Eastern Cape. Something like 18,000 hectares, some ridiculous, large tracts of land. And that initial project was about, they would alienate anywhere between 3,000 to 4,000 hectares of their farm enterprise into a NUCO, which NUCO would be majority owned by a black person or a black farming entrepreneur. And so you then start NUCO, majority black owned, the land bank funds it with instruments like you've referred to. And the idea is that this new black farmer in this new enterprise has the benefit of latching onto an established operating system. They would benefit from the operating system and the marketing system of an existing farmer. So that is just but one example, and we were driving it aggressively to find this kind of JV type models where you get to do that. And we succeeded. A couple of people who to this day are running very good farms. So the transformation agenda in agriculture is far from finished. In fact, I think it hasn't started in earnest, to be honest with you. And agriculture still holds enormous potential for large-scale employment creation, I think, as well as transforming rural communities. I mean, one of the people that I really enjoy spending time with is Gloria Serobe. And we know the kind of things that she's doing in the Eastern Cape in the area of agriculture. And I do tap her brain now and then when we get to talk and so on and so on. So yeah, South Africa owes itself a comprehensive program of including large numbers of black people into agriculture on a sustainable basis. Not only providing the money, but providing all the technical support that is required to farm and ensuring market access, because that is the one thing. I mean, it's a very controlled industry sometimes, the marketing channels. I mean, you have run food companies, you know how markets can be very concentrated around a few sort of boys club kind of arrangements. Yeah.
In fact, this brings me quite nicely and to my next area of discussion with Wendy about how she and Nomhle, Kanga, and Gloria started Whiphold, which was a huge investment vehicle for South African women, 18,000 and counting. I suppose they're still carrying on even now, and raising 25 million of their own money through small contributions. That was quite an achievement, particularly because we were just in the transition from apartheid to democracy.
Whiphold actually, I think unbeknown to a lot of people, predates all the legislation around BEE. We were amongst the first generation of Black economic empowerment companies. And the way that we structured what we wanted to do had embedded in it the broad-based principles, not in theory, in practice. And there was no law or policy that required that or that directed how that should be done. It was just something that we intuitively felt was important. And we started WePolled because we were feeling left out. So we were part of discussions with government about how Black people needed to participate in the economy. And we would find out later that the boys have organized themselves. That's how NAIL started, and a few other groups that existed at the time. And we felt that we could either wait to be invited as part of an existing group, impose ourselves, or start something. So we decided that we will start something. We don't know any less or more than the guys that are organizing themselves and starting, so we're all starting on a level play field. And we have just as much of a chance to succeed or fail as they do. And I think what set us apart was the broad-based nature of WePolled and how we started it. We understood that, including ourselves, we didn't fully know how the economy really works. So we spent the first 18 months traveling around the country, educating groups of women. We went from province to province and educated women about the importance of the economy, what role it plays in society, why we needed to participate in the economy beyond just being consumers of products and providing labor to the economy, and that being investors in our own right was critical for a number of reasons. And underlying that vision was to encourage women to take financial responsibility for themselves, to develop financial independence for themselves, because I think it's quite clear that when women are dependent on someone else for their financial well-being, it leads to a whole range of issues. So we were really responding to a number of things when we started WePolled. It was to educate women about the economy. It was to show that we could become investors in our own right, and we could learn to do that over time, and that women would gain financial independence over a period of time. And we succeeded to do that. WePolled is the only surviving Black economic empowerment of that generation, the first generation of those companies. They all have disbanded and distributed millions to the founders. WePolled still exists. It wasn't an open system, so the number of women that we started with are still the shareholders. So it wasn't a system that you would continue to contribute towards. And I think the proudest thing about what we created is that over the life of WePolled, which is almost as long as our democracy, because we started in '93, we paid dividends probably 10 times over the existence of the company. They were obviously related to what people would have invested, and what we did to make WePolled accessible. The minimum investment amount at the time, almost 30 years ago, was 600 Rand. And because it took us almost 2 years to educate women, it was also the time that they used to put the money away, because we wanted everyone to have access. And that if you raised 600 Rand, we matched it. So you started with 600 Rand and you immediately had shares that were worth twice that, 1,200 Rand. So that's a story of Wiphold, and how we put ourselves together was that I knew Louisa from Lesotho. I was at university with her. Louisa and Gloria worked together at Standard Bank, so they understood something about the industry that we wanted to get involved in. And we brought Nomhle because she also came from the financial services sector, but she represented the younger generation. So we wanted to blend, to go back to the concept of blending. And that's really how we found each other, and that's how we started. And we had complementary skills. I brought in the marketing skill and other skills that were important to promote the idea, to really articulate the vision to the nation. And I think we would not have we raised in total 100 million. So the first amount we raised was 25 million, and when we did a rights issue, we raised another 75. So in total, South African women raised 100 million Rand of their own money behind the idea. So it's something that is unprecedented. It has not been repeated. And I think by God's grace, people just really resonated, and the timing. So it was a combination of the timing, the vision made sense, it spoke to people, and I'm grateful that we did not let people down. You know, that whatever little people invested, they got a return for their investment.
I also like the idea that when I was looking at your very impressive work, you did talk about a major turning point in your life when one door was actually shut on your face. You were denied a promotion which you thought was supposed to be a walkover for you. You were not even allowed an interview. And then that's where you thought, you know what, let me go and do something else. And I suppose this is a lesson that it's not all smooth sailing. You know, you don't just sort of glide from Davidton and just land there, right? There are ups and downs, and sometimes a small little hiccup can be, even if it sounds like a stumbling block and a hurdle, can be actually a blessing in disguise. So actually, tell me about that area.
Quite correct. We need to look at what I guess would be described as failures or stumbling blocks as opportunities to reassess and look for the wisdom that those challenges actually offer us. When that happened, when I was overlooked for a promotion, I had been thinking for at least 3 years of starting on my own. I had already realized by then that I wasn't really cut out to be in a corporate environment. I wasn't the kind of person that would wait to be promoted through different levels and, by God's grace, become a CEO maybe when I'm 70. And that I could achieve much more with my life and I could make a greater contribution if I went to find out what I'm really capable of. So yes, being overlooked for a promotion did turn out to be a blessing in disguise. But I think those stumbling blocks become a blessing in disguise depending on how we interpret them, how we respond to them. I could have been disillusioned and start to question myself and my capability, which sometimes happens. But in this case, I actually saw this as a challenge to go and start. That's when I started TP Bridging the Gap. So Bridging the Gap was actually a business. The only book I've written is Defining Moments.
Yes, yes.
And I started bridging the gap because I felt very passionately about supporting, because I was a product of an environment where I was the first person to be thrust into a corporate environment. And I knew that that was the experience of many people. And I wanted to bridge that gap. We developed programs for all the black universities where we would go and help have conversations, bring in people who would have been working for at least 3 years to have conversations with first-year students and to share with them about what they studied, what their first job was, what that experience was like, to help them make the correct decisions. You heard how TP said he started with science and then through conversations was redirected to BCom. I mean, for a lot of young people who go to university, they will register for what the person in front of them is registering for. They go to university with absolutely no idea about what is the best field of study to pursue. So we felt that there was some guidance that was needed. We then also interacted with final year students to help prepare them for the market. How do you equip yourself and prepare yourself for the job opportunities in the marketplace? Again, that's not a skill that university equips us with. And if you don't come from a home where someone works in a corporate environment, you will fumble, at least for the first 3 years. And so that's the gap that we were trying to bridge. And that was my first business. And it really came out of my own personal experience, you know, and how long it took for me to find a job and how I eventually found my first job.
Isn't that fascinating? That's beautiful. So you, TP, you then moved to, you already spoken about your time at the development bank, which I think you spent about 11 years there.
Yes.
You remember even the day when it was formed, I'm told, that you, because when it was formed, it was still under the Bantustan system. And it was inaugurated by P.W. Botha,
Yeah.
who was still the prime minister.
Yeah.
And who was sitting next to him?
Beck.
Imagine from that time to where you ended up.
Yeah.
It's just, you
Yeah.
know, we can make a movie. Yeah, tell us about that.
I mean, I remember, as I say, at school, I didn't study commercial subjects. I was studying biology, physics, as it was called, and so. But the other guys who studied economics, you know, I always like to read. So there was a book, economics, and you go and read, and you read about something called the Development Bank of Southern Africa. It was formed in 1983. And there's an old video that you're referring to when it was launched with PW and Beck standing to each other, and they talk about this Development Bank of Southern Africa. It was such a remote thing at the time when you're like in standard 8 or standard 9 at the time. What do they call them now? Grade 10 or grade 11. But it was wonderful to go and join the DBSA when I came from Bloemfontein. And the interesting thing is that when I came from Bloemfontein, part of my work at the Development Corporation in the Free State involved property management, managing industrial properties and commercial properties, and you know those estates. You remember in the homeland areas and around the townships. So, as a way of coming through to Johannesburg, I got a job which I only occupied for about 11 months or so, working at the Department of Public Works. I worked in Pretoria at the Department of Public Works. The minister was Minister Stella Stau at the time. I lasted only just over a year. It's quite challenging to work for government. And of course, my eyes were set on the development bank. And the opportunity came. As I say, I was employed there by Mandla Kancho. And it was a good time that we spent there. But yeah, you know, you learn a lot as you grow up. And some of the things I suppose that one learned at the DBSA was, I would say, the risks to leadership, because that's where started becoming a head of a unit and divisional, and then you become a boss. Many people. And in my view, some of the things really, as you progress, some of the risks to leadership is the pressure for performance, yeah, and which can tilt your life and create a sense of imbalance if not well handled, I think, where you become so obsessed with career success that you sacrifice your health, you sacrifice your family, and so on and so on. For me, I think I'm lucky. I have a very patient and a very understanding wife. And so, but health-wise, I think I came sometimes to the brink of collapsing myself. So that is the one thing. The second thing I think that is worth mentioning, which is could be a downside risk to leadership, and I'm sure Wendy will comment on this based on what she has seen, are the temptations that come with leadership. There's a lot of temptations. You're in a powerful position. Whether you like it or not, some people will approach you and make some suggestions about doing this and that. You may get yourself on the wrong side of the law. I remember a case study. That was my first experience, coming across a case of how unethical conduct can destroy a person, leadership. When we were doing the MBL at UNISA, and maybe I shouldn't mention names, but a CEO of one of the banks at the time, cut a long story short, facilitating a loan, I still remember, of about 10 million rand for someone that he had a relationship with outside his marriage. House and businesses established, I remember vividly, in Plattenberg Bay. Long story short, when that thing came, it destroyed his brilliant career as a big person in that particular bank. So financial temptations, romantic temptations, if one is not careful, can destroy.
It's a very important point to make, because one of the things we try to impress upon here at ULP is ethical leadership. Mm-hmm. So you can't get to this level without, giving someone a brown envelope or receiving it.
Exactly.
So there is actually a reward to hard work, contrary to popular belief. You can work hard and reach the levels of success that you want to reach. We don't have much time. We're now approaching the Q&A session, so I see questions are already coming in. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to touch on a few little inspirational moments with you, if you don't mind, Wendy.
What if I do?
A few inspirational moments.
What if I do mine? I'm just teasing you.
What do we do if she minds? We still ask, good. So for instance, I was quite touched. I have a daughter at university, so I was quite touched by And perhaps you can think about this, TP, when I come next to you, about the books that inspired you. Okay, I'm very, very interested because people always find inspiration beyond just meeting mentors and stuff. And your dad, when you turned 21, gave you a book which sort of helped you to carve your path. I was just I found that really warm. And my daughter is turning 21 next year, so I'm already thinking, like your dad. The book is written by Dr. Wayne Dyer, and it's Your Erroneous Zones. Tell me about that.
Well, the reason the book made such an impact on me is that it gave me the opportunity to realize at a very early age that I'm responsible for my life. Because I think there's a tendency to, especially having grown up in the system that I grew up in, we did tend to blame everything. You blame the system, you blame your parents, you blame everything else. And what that book really made clear to me was that notwithstanding what the circumstances are, what your experience have been, ultimately the responsibility to make the best of my life is my responsibility. Some people will help along the way or not, but I am responsible. And recognizing that, I think, liberated me. It just gave me the freedom to focus on discovering what my real talents are, what my passion is, and how to build that to the best of my ability.
And I like so I need you to think of two things now quickly, because we're under pressure for time. How I love Partners for Possibility, which you worked on, matching professionals with young school-going children. You did a project with the Davidson School.
Yes, no, what that was about was partnering leaders in business with school principals to help the school principals develop the leadership capabilities that they needed to run the schools properly. Yeah. The history of our schools is that we don't develop principals. Someone who is a good teacher gets thrust into a leadership role, and there is no support system to help them fulfill that role as competently as they can. And I was drawn to that project because it gave me an opportunity, first of all, to give back to a school in Davidson, part of where I grew up, and to help to support a school principal to become the best leader that she can be for the school. Because I don't think that a lot of school principals see themselves as leaders. They see themselves as school principals. And what Partners for Possibility has done successfully is to help them transition into understanding that it is a leadership role and how critical it is in building the school, in building the teachers, even in building teams. I mean, part of what I did was to build a team between the principal and the teachers, which didn't exist, because the teachers were operating in silos. And so bringing in the corporate principles of leadership into a school environment so that the school can be as effective as it can.
I also like something I saw you say in a speech at UNISA about consumerism, like conspicuous consumption, which has engulfed our nation. This thing of people just buying expensive things and posing on social media with bags and sunglasses and God knows what. You said in Africa we consume things we do not make, and we make things we do not consume.
They're not my words.
I know,
Yeah,
you were
it's a
quoting someone
disclaimer,
else,
yes,
yeah.
They are
But
not mine.
you said it, I heard it from you, yeah. But you were quoting somebody else, yeah. But I kind of liked that concept about the rand and the dollar circulating in various communities. And it would be nice just to perhaps share with people your thoughts about that thing of keeping the rand to circulate a little bit longer amongst your own communities to lift them up. Because sometimes lifting up communities, it's not just by getting a loan from the bank, it's just thinking about where you're buying your bread and so on.
Well, the statistics suggest that any currency circulates the longest in the Jewish community. I think it's 30 times. And then in the Indian community, and the least in the African communities or black communities. But I think that has changed, though, with the township economy. I think that over the last 30 years, it's as bad as it used to be those years ago. I think it has really changed. I think people have recognized the importance of creating products for their own market. I mean, there's a lot of companies, I can't remember the names, like the guys who've created Batu, for example.
Yes.
There's a lot of where that young people are creating. There's a lot that's going on. So I think that has changed, but that used to be the case. And I think it's important to recognize the power that our market represents and find the courage to produce products for that market.
Thank you. TP, can I come to you as we conclude this section before we open it up for questions? So if you want to ask a question, think about it, make it short and sweet, and don't give us a long speech. And then we'll come to you when the time is right. The same for you online. So, as you're typing, don't write the stuff you write on your WhatsApp groups. Just give us a short sound bite. That's very, very, that's my language, sound bites. Now, TP, I wanted to bring you just briefly. It will be so unfair that you come here. You're the CEO of IDC. You're sitting to the former chair of IDC, and we say nothing about it. It will be a tragedy. Nothing controversial, so don't panic. I just want you to get a chance, and I know you're doing work. I mentioned it when I was reading your bio with the Youth Enterprise Society, which is important. We always have to share, lift as you rise, as Bonang Mohale would say. But I want to talk about IDC. You have in excess of 6 billion investments there, more or less, as I understand it. Over 40 billion locked up in mining and resources. Tell us what's going on there post-COVID, what you're trying to achieve, are things going well? I know it's tough everywhere, but what can we look out for?
So I should do a bit of advertising for the organization. No. Again, those of us who are there now as executives are grateful for those who came before us. She was the chairperson, I think, was it for 10 years? Yes, and have built incredible investments which continue to sustain the organization now. So, I joined the organization in 2019, January 1st. As usual, you'll spend time getting to know people and what have you. I think the first significant things that have happened during the year was changes in leadership. A couple of guys came to retirement, house, living, and so on and so on. So changes in leadership and having to assemble a new team of people. I did the hiring together with the board, and the one thing which, of course, is one of those things that is not so pleasant is that yes, there has been a couple of people promoted from within, but a lot of people were hired from outside as well. So the board has said to me, I mean, if there's one thing that you would have achieved well for whatever number of years you spend here, is building some kind of a talent pool that could, take over executive level roles. But the second thing that I would like to mention is that I have never been so scared in my life as I was in February, March of 2020. Why? Two things that happened in the economy generally, but specific impacts on the IDC. One, Sasol nearly went bankrupt. And it was at the time the largest single investment holding on the balance sheet of the IDC. I can give you the numbers. There is public information because it's in our annual report. When we closed the books in March of 2019, Sasol was valued, the give and take 8-point-something stake of the IDC was valued, and it's a valuation because it's a listed stock. It was valued just over 23 billion rand. Sasol alone, its IDC valuation. When we closed the books a year later in March 2020, it had lost more than 20 billion of the value. So the numbers are there, you can check them. So, and then a couple of other stocks also which devalued and other non-listed assets. So the capital base of the IDC in March 2020 had shrunk by just over 32 billion from where it was in March of 2019. I had never been so scared in my life. Yeah? And then, of course, in the middle of that, COVID hit, and we went into lockdown. And we had to close all leisure businesses. The IDC has a big portfolio of tourism assets, hotels, lodges, and things like that, somewhere in the order of about 13 billion rand or so. A lot of industries that are connected to international logistics systems, like clothing and textiles, they get their things from abroad and things like that. Supply chains were interrupted and what have you. So what did we do? We had a corporate plan, chairperson, approved by the board and what have you. Come April, I went to the board and I said, you see, this corporate plan is no longer valid. We needed an interim strategy to help us navigate through the COVID environment. So we put aside the corporate plan. We placed emphasis on one, yes, looking after our employees. Two, supporting our customers with all sorts of concessionary arrangements. If somebody defaults, you don't just close them up. You defer payments and things like that. Three, we had to look through our pipeline of transactions and we trimmed down and what have you, and we placed a lot of emphasis on maintaining cash, maintaining liquidity. Four, I was on the phone every day talking to our international funders, those who have bought our bonds and those who offer us credit lines, the European Investment Bank, the African Development Bank, China Development Bank, to say, please don't close the credit lines. Leave the liquidity lines open so that we continue to do business. So we then survived like that. And of course, the volume of business reduced during that particular year. You can't go gung-ho lending a lot when you are in a situation like that. But again, to the point that the chairperson here was mentioning, life goes on and things change. You come across difficult situations, but then things turn around. What has happened? The resources stock started rallying. Yeah? We were facing a potential rights issue at Sasol. Credit to him, Fleetwood and the team. They have done a sterling job. We know what they did. They sold non-core assets. They improved efficiencies, cut costs, whatever. And we averted a rights issue, which would have cost the IDC somewhere just over 3.2 billion rand to maintain our stake. So, well done. And then guess what? Things happen and the oil price moves from what? 30 to 60, 70. And the valuation of Sasol goes through the roof. So things happen. Worse, now Russia invades Ukraine. The share price goes to 140 a barrel or somewhere there. And now, that share, which was almost on the floor, is touching 400 a share. And so the balance sheets have been restored and so on and so on. So, cut a long story short, the balance sheet of the organization was well restored by mid-2021, really, the finances had come back. And so we are back in a big way trying to advance finances into the economy, lend more money, and so on. Yes, it's tricky because we reinvest in the real economy. So yeah, never in my life had I faced such a tumultuous time. It was very traumatic, yeah.
What a powerful story. Can I quickly just ask you to think about books that you can mention?
Yes.
Because I want to come back just to close with Wendy. Wendy, Seagulls, the book by Jonathan Livingston. I just love that story because succession is very important in leadership, and that people must understand we don't promote dictatorship. You can't sit there and stay there forever. So you need to think about succession. Can you just share briefly about the formation of the seagulls and how they fly? That was beautiful. If I forget anything I read in my research in the last few weeks, that is the one I'll be dining on. So look out for my dinner party stories. It's absolutely fantastic.
I guess the reason that book had such an impact for me was that the model of leadership at that time was that you lead from the front. And what that book taught me was that you actually lead best from the back. And that when you obviously lead the pack to a certain point and you step back and allow those behind you to step forward, and so it goes. And it planted seeds in my mind about the importance of succession. And in all the boards where I have sat, it's something that I have spearheaded with great passion, because we don't do that very well. We don't plan for ourselves to be removed from roles. We are often forced to be removed from roles, and it gets very messy. So I like the idea of getting people to feel comfortable with the idea of stepping aside, of building a depth of experience and capability behind them. Because we could be run over by a bus, actually. So this idea that as leaders we're indispensable is not a sustainable idea. We need to make sure that if anything happened to us, there will be such a depth of talent in our organizations that the organization will not be stuck. So that's why that book for me was. But again, I think it's a function of when you read what book. I read it early in my life. I was in my 20s when I read that book. That it made such a huge impact. It's a simple story, but it's a very powerful story.
So the story, in simple terms, is that the seagulls, when they fly in a circular formation, and the one in the front is leading. But when it gets tired, when the wings get tired, it moves to the back and another one takes over. And if you can start to think like seagulls.
And that's how they reach their destination.
And that's how they reach their destination. We will fly and soar.
So everyone has a role to play
Yeah.
in reaching our destination.
Yeah.
No.
No lifetime leader.
Well, I think the concept is that all of us are leaders, not necessarily the person who occupies the role. We actually all can contribute towards the leadership journey of an organization because we all bring different talents to that journey.
Thank you very much. I now open the floor for questions. I will start with the ones that have come via online because they're already in. So we start with Brasiza Mulebate. Oh, that's a very nice question to come in. How will IDC help African farmers engage in agri-value, a value chain, and go beyond being outgrowers for established farmers and agro-processors? So that's directly to you, IDC. Oh my goodness, we also have an overflow. So we have a lot of people, there's an overflow hall there. Oh, guys. There are people who are hosting events and the chairs are empty. So we must clap. We must clap. Did you hear Wendy saying step aside? Is good. Huh? I don't know. I just felt so much silence. I thought, these people, they missed a big point.
Step aside.
Bringing in a political connotation to my comment.
I'm just being myself. Akona Kabaka for Mr. Nchocho as well. How involved are you with agriculture, particularly development and support? Are these people sort of in one place forming these agricultural questions? And support for farming in rural areas, what programs are there both at IDC and or Land Bank that can assist rural areas? So before you start answering those two questions, could you be kind to suggest the books that you think we should read that inspired you?
Yeah, and obviously I have tended to read around leadership literature and so on and so on. The one book which is really, and I still go back to it now and then, is called True North. Bill George, and I had the pleasure of being in his class in 2014 in Boston at the school, at the Harvard Business School. So very, very insightful about leadership and finding what truly guides you, because in terms of decision making, so that you have a particular grounding, so otherwise you run the risk of making decisions in a random way and going with every wind that blows in any direction. But if you establish a sense of values and what you stand for and what you're looking for, that is the one book. The one book that I also found instructive, I know it was talked about, and what is his name? Songezo, I think is his name. Raising the Bar. I thought that book was so relevant. Raising the Bar. Songezo Zibi, the journalist. I mean, he's your colleague in the profession.
He's a lovely man. I
Yeah.
him. Yeah.
It's well written. It has a black perspective in it, I think. He places a lot of emphasis on this taking responsibility as black people to define our own futures. But also says, given the history of disadvantage that we have as a country, surely there's an obligation on institutions to play a proactive role of lifting those who come from a history of disadvantage. Yeah? And then there's another one which is called, the title is, it says Leaders Make the Future. The reason why I like this book is because it talks about the fact that in either running organizations or doing business, there will be big problems. You'll encounter the Sasol type situation. But those who are true leaders are the ones that rise up to these challenges. So, to the point that was made when you were overlooked for a promotion, it's about overcoming that and stepping up to do something else much better and making the future. Really, your message, Wendy, about taking responsibility, this thing of blaming and pointing fingers all the time. Yes, where we have been done wrong, I suppose there's justification to raise displeasure about the injustice. But when all that is done, your life is still your life, and it's yours to live, isn't it? Yeah.
No, thank you very much. I have a few comments here which are quite worthy of mentioning. I think Moses Nyanga, who's asked about in Africa we consume what we don't make and things that we don't make, and we don't consume what we make. Can we change that? And if we can, how do we change it? I think it was already answered, Moses, with due respect, if you were listening. Wendy did actually delve into it quite well for us to understand that thought. So thank you for the question. And there's a message from Professor Bonang Mohale, ngiyabonga kakhulu, bungani nkosi yami, he says. And then Jack Koma, beautiful, good to hear of the role played by Lazarus Zim and SEO alumni in his life. That's very nice. Get a tick there for your praise of Lazarus. TP. Brownie points. I have also a very nice comment which from Tumi Sikiti, Head of Retail SA Lesotho and Eswatini at Puma Energy. What great session with Mam Wendy and Mr. Nchocho. Valuable points they shared, particularly like the story on accountability that Mr. Nchocho shared with his mentor from Standard Bank. Mam Wendy touched on such a simple yet critical point on the impact of leaders' availability for a quick coffee catch-up. It is through these platforms that knowledge is imparted. I have had the pleasure of meeting her over coffee. One of your coffee and he closes by, I'm hoping to be physically present in the next session. So overflow coming again. So I think that's pretty much it. How important is understanding finance in their line of work? Sia Tikana, what was that question about? I don't understand it very well, Sia. I think you will, if you go back. What does success mean to the guests from Patisa? Okay, I will use this question as your closing statements. We have to close it. We're now hitting 8:30. And there's load shedding and we all need to get home safely. And then we've got these guys, but I'm closing the ones online, right? Yeah. Okay, so should we take more here and then you close, or do you want to just do quick soundbite? Okay, let's go. Okay, so who decides where the mic goes? Who's the... I'm terrified of pointing at people where the mic is not there.
Okay, thanks. I got lucky. I was given the mic. Thanks a lot to the panelists. Very inspiring indeed. We are the most unequal society in our country. And I really applaud Wendy for bridging the gap and going back to the township to try and lift others. My question is the seduction of power that both of you alluded to. When we rise, we don't lift as it's known in the African community. There's this conspicuous consumption that the facilitator spoke about. How do we help the upcoming CEOs that are sitting in this room and in the overflow to then not repeat the mistakes of our generation where we just had the economics of the stomach without thinking of where we came from, like Wendy did to plow back. I remember in the late 90s there was that issue of plowing back.
Thank you.
So how can we help bridge that gap?
Thank you. Thank you. Next question, please. Thank you. Very good question, Mudisa. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you so much, Wendy and TP. I think my question is somewhat similar. Thank you for sharing your personal stories. It was really valuable. TP, when you spoke about the IDC and the turmoil that you went through in 2020, I can only imagine the impact on SMMEs if that was the impact on Sasol. I'm curious to find out what has been done specifically around enabling and empowering SMMEs, because we know it's such a key part of our economy. Since being able to recover, what has been done fundamentally different to support SMMEs? Thank you.
Is that the last question?
At our age, our memory is not very long, so don't take too many questions.
Okay.
Three, yeah.
Okay, just one last one, yeah.
Okay. My name is Joshua Mtanyelo from Katlehong. We're coming from an organization, rather Skill Development Academy. Presently, we're training about 500 young people around Gauteng to participate in the e-commerce space. It's funded by TITA. So we train them in venture creation level 2, but also help them to ride bikes, to have license to ride bikes. But then I want to say to Wendy, what is an opportunity for these young people in PEPCO, in your company, that they can be able to participate and be able to serve your customers by delivering their program? We have almost about 50 of them that are here in this hall. And that day, Nchocho, from IDC point of view, how can we help this group of young entrepreneurs to be funded to participate in the value chain of e-commerce in terms of owning their own bikes, having an assembly plant that will be owned by guys from the township, but also having their repairing shops that will repair the shop, but also to create apps that will be able to run these bikes. But I want to say, guys, your story is very inspirational. Thank you.
Right. What of that can you remember? The last one. The last one. Okay, so let me summarize what I had, which probably will refresh your mind. SMMEs, what was done, apart from the rise of Sasol. And then,
I do remember.
yes.
Just say don't take more than 5.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Let's hit the ground. Okay, so.
Well, let me start with Joshua's question. I'm not sure what you have in mind about what opportunities we can offer for your bicycle riders, owners. They own the bicycles.
Bikes.
Delivery bikes. Okay. I completely missed that. We are not in that industry. We're not involved in the business that I'm involved in, or that I'm not even operating the business. I chair the board of the business. Provides to wholesalers. We make products for Checkers, Spar, Woolworths, so we're not interfacing with the end consumer. We are involved in food businesses, though, like your McDonald's, who are already involved in that industry. So we would not be in a position to provide any opportunities. I will leave you to answer the question about the small to medium-sized enterprises, but the question about lifting others, I think we do that anyway in our communities. It's just undervalued. We've heard people have a discussion about the black tax. For example, I was the first one to graduate from university in my family, and I helped to educate my younger sister. And I think a lot of us do that. So we might not have the resources, it's a function of resources. We might not have the resources to lift beyond our families, but we give back to our families. We give back to our immediate community. I think your question really applies in the case where people have resources, where people have been blessed with opportunities that have generated huge amounts of money. What do they do with that? Petrus Mutsipe is an example. He started a foundation. I'm not close to what his foundation does. So I don't think it's correct to actually say that we don't. I think we do. It's just that the need is so enormous in our communities and there's a small number of people who have been able to generate resources over the last 30 years. And that's why the concept of empowerment and creating as many opportunities as possible for as many people as possible and creating access is so critical, so that we're not depending on just a small number of people who've been lucky enough over the last 30 years. How can we multiply those numbers so that more and more people... On my way here, I was listening to a conversation about comments that were made by Tito Mboweni, that in his view, we really need to break this dependency on social grants. And I'm sure people are not going to respond well to that comment, but I think he's correct. But we can't take away that dependency without replacing it with something else. So what will we offer people so that they develop the capacity to generate a living for themselves?
Thank you. I can just to the point about the bikers and so on and so on. So yes, the IDC, the way it works, on a direct basis might not necessarily be able to assist that kind of enterprise you're talking about. But here is the possibility. You might have seen it last week on Friday. In Gauteng, between us, the IDC, the Department of Economic Development in Gauteng, which is headed by Ms. Pakstow, and an organization called the SASME Fund, which is an initiative of business. We have put together a township businesses support fund, where we put in 200 million as the IDC. The Gauteng province has put in 100 million, and the SASME fund has put in 200 million. So it's 500 million. It is not administered at the IDC. It is administered through the Gauteng Enterprise Propeller and a network of service providers who are selected under the SASME fund. So probably I could arrange for information to reach the network here, where an inquiry can be sent to one of the people at the IDC, because you can then approach that platform and see us. It's a generic fund. Anything that has to do with creating employment, people doing things for themselves, as long as it is legal. So it's a Gauteng one, and we are contemplating, to your question, we are contemplating doing the same in other provinces to the extent that we can get partnerships. Because in order to bring the overall cost of capital down in this kind of thing, you need that grant portion from the state. The SASME fund also provides the money on a concessional basis, so that we intermediate the money to the small businesses as cost effectively as possible. We have not, you see, South Africa generally, I don't know your take, Wendy, we really have not run a successful national SME funding and support program. No, we haven't. All the organizations that are there, and I'm not casting aspersions, CIFA and what, they are restructuring at the moment and so on and so on, so all sorts of things. And then the provincial development institutions, whether it's Itala in Natal or Northwest in whatever, so all of them are not really hitting the spot in terms of reaching beneficiaries and so on and so on. So what we are doing at the IDC, the first thing that we have done, we have since remodeled our provincial offices. We have at least one, in some provinces, 2 offices throughout the country. They have up to now worked more as information centers. You'd go there and make an inquiry about the IDC and so on. No, we have changed them to give them financing mandates so that people in provinces can go and apply for funding at our regional offices. And there's one in Gauteng, which is based at head office. 2, we try to drive this program. I've come to call it SME Connect. And the thinking is very simple. Where the IDC is financing a major project, let's say we are spending 3 billion to build a new mine, we should then agree with the developers of the mine that there has to be an SME development program which is attached to the program. So on a very deliberate basis, the various items of expenditure, whether it's bricks or cement or steel or whatever, we can itemize them so that small businesses in the area have access to that, and then we can provide the working capital. Because in my experience, the key to doing successful small business development is that you don't just give money. You have to give them the opportunity to trade, to sell the product, and the opportunity to be supported in various ways. So we are trying to build that ecosystem, but the challenge is massive. And it's a challenge which the IDC cannot meet on its own. You need other development institutions, particularly in the provinces and CIFA and all this, to also work and work effectively. The agri question, up to now, the IDC has sort of narrowed its mandate to do agro-processing and leave primary agriculture to either the commercial banks or the land bank. But increasingly, we are embracing a strategy where we are looking for agricultural or farming businesses that have a sense of forward integration. So even if it's primary production, do you pack the product or do you create a route to market, sort of forward integrated a little bit other than being solely primary production? But we recognize the need. The team at the IDC for agriculture is relatively small. I think the challenge as I see it is for me and working with the board to see if we can expand the size of the team at the IDC and do more in the agricultural financing space.
Thank you so very much. Brasiza, they're going to increase the staff of the agricultural sector at IDC, and then you'll start to see some changes. Ladies and gentlemen, I think one more question. Okay.
There was a question about how to avoid pitfalls or something like that. What is that?
But did you have a question, Prof? Oh, one more round. Okay. Okay, guys, the boss says one more round. So we agree. One last round of 3 questions, short and sweet.
Good evening, Wendy. I have a question. You spoke about this quest for revenge against the system as one of the catalysts for you working hard in the earlier sort of ages. I think the first question that I have is, to what extent do you think you have achieved this quest of revenge against the system? And number 2, would you say that the contemporary generation that might be motivated by the same quest is justified to do so? And do you think it's useful to have such a motivator? Thank you.
It depends on how you revenge. If your revenge is destroying buildings, and what we've seen, it's not helpful. So my revenge was to demonstrate that I am capable as a black person and that I can pioneer solutions that can make a difference in my community. So for me, that's the best revenge. It doesn't really help us to... I think the best way to fight is to show that we can build solutions. That, you know, I feel very strongly about changing the culture of dependency on anything. And so when you revenge to change that equation and take responsibility to be independent, to find solutions, to create your batus and all the products that we see coming out of the township, a brand of jeans, and all the things that your generation is doing, which is inspiring. That's revenge. That you create a product that people can consume instead of just depending on the products that are already in the marketplace and feeling that your only contribution to the economy is to consume and to work for someone. So changing that equation, becoming financially independent, being an investor, creating a business, and I agree with TP, we haven't developed successfully a sustainable ecosystem that provides all the support that entrepreneurs need.
Hello? Oh. Okay, ke a leboha haholo. If I may just thank you both, Mayor, Wendy, and Ntate TP. My question, actually, it's just me requesting that tea time, ke tla use now. Women in the townships these days are facing a huge amount of abuse based on they are not independent in any way. But now I see honali this thing, yeah, the where we have 35-year-olds, you know, you're looking for a job from the age of 35, you can't receive anything. But we find these are the people in the townships who are home. They actually they run their homes, they have kids, but they can't find work. At the end of the day, they get to be sidelined. So I'm asking this question based on how can we get these women to actually gather and invest and change the mindset and, you know, educating them, but also showing them, because I've seen Kadi 350 cents a grant. I'll say this because we are using those funds to actually invest into our companies. We have a construction company where we're using those funds to buy the equipment, Kadi 350. So they're not going to our stomachs. We're using them to uplift ourselves. But how can we get more people to actually see that? If I may just take this time and hear from these ideas.
Thank you very much. Last question. Yeah.
My name is Takani Mataiya. Thank you so much for this session. Wendy, it's been a long time. I wanted to meet you, and I'm very excited today. And the DTP, thank you so much for the wisdom. My question is actually a build-up of what the lady was saying, based on women empowerment. I wanted to find out from you, Mama, especially, what does the meaning of women empowerment mean to you from your days, and do you think the meaning has changed currently? Because when we look right now, I think things have regressed a lot, because then we had role model like yourself, like Bomama Pilisiwe Mtetwa, Bomama Busi Mabuza and the likes, but now we see, you know, the lesser and the lesser and the lesser. So how do we get back to that? The question from the DTP is, I just want to find out, it's just a land question, you know, a genuine land question that is boggling me in South Africa, that we want our land back, and land is wealth. And I've been hearing a lot of people, when they talk land, they talk agriculture, and it's worrying me because I'm from Soweto myself, and I don't know what is agriculture. I never seen cows and all that. I don't have that mindset. My mindset is to get the land for different thing for corporate business to have a bank, to own a mine. There's a lot of resources about land. So I just want you to break it down maybe according to your understanding, because I think most of us as youth, we're getting confused when we talk about land, people thinking agriculture, and I just want to pick up on your wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay.
Should I start?
You can start.
You can go ahead, TP.
Look, Wendy will talk a lot about her, experiences about women and empowerment, what it means, that specific question to her. But my little take is regarding this issue, and I've been giving it a lot of thought because I come from Kwako Putecha, and there are a lot of people who don't work there. But at its most basic, and I don't know the business school prof, those who teach entrepreneurship there, it is probably easier said than done to say, can you identify a need which you can then fulfill as a way of starting a business? And in doing so, try and think through beyond the obvious. The obvious is to start some shebeen and sell alcohol. But I was having a discussion with two of my nieces who are unemployed, 24-year-old. And I was saying to them, one of the experiences that we went through as a family on my wife's side was my father-in-law very sick over a long period of time before he passed away last year. And one of the things that we struggled with my wife, based here in Johannesburg, was finding someone who could take care of him. Someone that, not someone who comes to clean the house, but more a if there's anything like that, a semi-nursing kind of care, whom we were prepared to pay. You see what I mean? But imagine a situation if these young ladies in the township could organize themselves, identify a need and say, there are these following old people in this area. We will buy a small van or a little car, and our job will be to move from house to house and give them basic care. Wash them, give them the necessary medication that they need, take their blood pressure. And guess who pays? Is TP, who's based in Johannesburg. And they develop a model. Sort of find something interesting, something unique, I would say. You can think about other things around food systems and water and whatever. So, and then the issue about land. You're right. Land is predominantly understood in South Africa to be an agriculture issue. But remember, urban land, which is used for residential purposes, in the urban areas, it is particularly problematic. I mean, all of us are aware of informal settlements coming up everywhere, basically running far ahead of urban planning systems. Everywhere you go, there's houses on top of mountains and along the highway and whatever. All those are land use issues. I remember having a discussion with Andy Lengaba, the one who founded Dimension Data, and he was working with a group of scientists, and they're developing models of integrating population data, land data, and information about property companies and whatever, and doing long-term spatial planning. In fact, I haven't caught up with him in a long while because they were modeling the possible direction of growth of Gauteng as a city region, as it used to be called. In what directions would it grow? And if it were to grow towards Villiers or in what direction, then what kind of infrastructure would you need to integrate people into the main centers of commerce and so on and so on. So, yeah, you're right. It's not about agriculture only. It's about housing development, it's about industrial land, commercial land, land for social amenities being sports, and clinics and schools and things like that. Yeah.
What does empowerment mean to me? It means many things. Having access to education, to information, to technology. We live in a technology age, and that's what most of your generation really uses to have access to rich people. And having your own money. I think for me, if you don't have financial resources, it's very difficult to be empowered. Mm-hmm. And I do understand that if you're unemployed, then you're stuck in a vicious cycle. But as TP was saying, if we can't find employment, at least we have the education to think up what else can we do with the education that we have. So let's not get stuck at the fact that we are unemployed, we're not getting opportunities. Let's get together and look at, as TP was saying, what is needed around us that we can create a business out of and develop that into something that could become quite significant. So I think it's important that we don't think of empowerment in it's not a one-dimensional thing. It's a multi-dimensional thing, and it really depends on what people need at any given time. So we can't employ a definition that says this is what should apply to everyone, because everyone is at a different place in their lives. For another woman, it might mean getting support from an abusive relationship and enabling them to walk out of that relationship. But then if they don't have resources, what are the options that they have? So it will mean different things to different people. But I think to respond, to create a bridge to the earlier question, we have demonstrated, our generation has demonstrated what's possible. And what's important is that your generation must learn from that, take the baton, and develop it further. And what has happened is that between our generation and your generation, something has been lost. Yeah. And I don't quite know where it got lost and how it got lost. It might be that we were trying to catch up with lost time, and we got consumed with buying things, buying cars, for example. I always advise young people that when you start working, do not start by buying a car. And if possible, do not rent your own home. This is actually something else that TP we need to look at how it gets changed, because what makes buying property for young people are the expenses that are involved. So if the expenses, the lawyer's fees for transfers, if all of those expenses could be part of the bond, so that young people can just pay one amount, which would be equivalent to what they are paying towards rent, I think it would go a long way in enabling young people to buy their own homes.
Yeah. Well.
So I don't believe that we should start by buying a car. Yes, I know that the transport system in South Africa is unreliable and we live far from our places of work. We need to find a way to get to work, but maybe we can find other solutions. Maybe we can pool resources and buy one car and look at a lift club until we're in a position to afford our own cars. But the first thing that we should buy when we start working is our own home, because that's an asset. It appreciates. You can lend against it to do other things. As you pay it, you can use some of that money, especially if you pay slightly more than what your bond requires. You can access that money and then maybe perhaps buy yourself a car. So I think we need to be quite smart about how we manage the limited resources that we have, but make sure we live within our means and make sure that we invest in assets that appreciate. A car doesn't appreciate. The minute you drive it out of the showroom, it's already lost value. a home will always appreciate in value. So if you are paying rent of whatever amount, you can afford to buy a home that is exactly the same amount of rental that you pay. The only challenge is that we need to figure out how to structure the bonds so that those additional costs, which a lot of young people won't be able to afford, become part of the bond.
Thank you so much. I think we've now come to the end of our session. We have some comments here from Slakalani Mulepo thanking us about what ULP is doing, thanking Tate Maurice for a powerful session, and Patisa Nombaguse asking about succession. It was already dealt with. Patisa, thank you so much. Busi Maluleka, thank you ULP for an insightful and empowering sessions. Thank you. And we're grateful to everyone who sent questions, and let's continue the discussion online. As they say in meetings offline, we're continuing online. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Now it is the time for the chairman to come and give us a vote of thanks.
You wanted us to close with the question about
please, go ahead.
Yes.
Parting
if
shot.
you still want us to do that.
Parting shots.
Parting shots, yeah.
For me, success means leaving the world much better than what I found.
Wow.
So if in my life journey I've only enriched myself, I've actually failed. But if I've enriched one more person, then I've done a good job. You know, and there's a multiplier effect that happens, that when we enable just one person, if all of us can just enable one person, somehow we impose an obligation to them to do that for someone else without asking them to do that. They automatically know that they've been enabled, they have to enable someone else. And maybe they'll enable 2 people or 3 people. And that's how the multiplication begins to happen, and that it becomes embedded as a culture of how we live our lives. That to just be preoccupied with success for ourselves is very, very shallow and limited, with all due respect. We only succeed if other people around us succeed. If we just succeed in an island of poverty, we have actually failed. And that's what concerns me the most about. I think the question was asked about the huge inequality in our country. That's something that disturbs me. When you have companies where CEO is being considered for 300 million and they're not able to approve a 1,000 rands for their employees, an additional 150 rand for people who really create wealth for that company. It's not the CEO that creates wealth. It's the people who are on the ground, who put their lives at risk. Until we correct that, in South Africa in particularly, we have failed. Democracy has not succeeded. Freedom without improving the lives of the majority of our people is not worth freedom. So that would be my...
Well said.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, TP.
Yeah.
Oh, no, thank you. Oh, let's give him a round of applause. Yeah. Oh, that was awesome. Well, let's thank our moderator, Pramilton. Solid research that is there, consummate professional. Unbelievable. Thank you very much, Pramilton. This makes it extremely useful sessions. Sis Wendy, thank you very much. I really want to encourage you to buy his book, Defining Moment. Normally, Nchocho unfortunately is not feeling well, but I wanted to instruct her that she should ask your office to bring them here, because people will buy them and they will arrange them so that you can read that book. Thank you very much, Sis Wendy, for all the good work. You've pioneered. We followed you when we were all youngsters, and you've done a great job just by being there. I remember when I was young, you ran one of the sessions, and you wouldn't even remember, but I was part of the audience, and you were running a very good session on marketing and workshops. It was amazing. I was still at Shell at that time. Let me thank Dave. He's not here, but he hears us. He's been communicating. Roslyn is here. The National Mentorship Movement. Everybody who's been talking about mentorship here, ULP and National Mentorship Movement is really making mentorship a cool thing to do. So again, I just want to ask each one of you, especially all those people who've been coming to ULP for the last 10 years. Now, some of you are big shots. I can see at the back there's our CEO of Siemens Energy, Thabo. Let's clap hands for him. He started sitting at the back, and last session he was sitting in front. Now he's there at the back to come and listen to you. So thank you very much, Thabo. Also like to acknowledge so again, Roslyn, please raise your hand there. If you want to be a mentor, just see Roslyn. And where's Tefa? Tefa, stand up, Tefa. Stand up. Yeah, the big giant man there. He's going to help you. We really want to make sure that this entire movement of mentorship continues. I'd like to thank Old Mutual in our mutually collaborating partnership. The representative of Old Mutual is here, and we've worked very well. I'd like to thank people on the overflow. Just because of COVID, we couldn't get everybody in here. So let's clap hands for those that are sitting, watching on the screen. I always like to take this opportunity to introduce leaders who are making a difference. I think what you said, Sis Wendy, that you've got to make this world a little bit better than you found it. And some people make it a little bit worse than they found it. So please, just don't make it worse than you found it. Yeah. The leader of Men of Purpose, Joshua, please stand up. I'm sure there's a lot of young people. His passion, Sis Wendy, and TP is a boy child. Because if we're not looking after that boy child, that's why we've got this huge GBV, gender-based violence, because all these young people grow up not knowing how to really relate to women. And his passion is to do that. He's doing it in the townships here. On Monday, yeah? He had a massive conference that was full of men, only men. Just talk. It was unbelievable. I just couldn't believe it. Just talking about issues of men. How men, and some of the frightening, how men were rejected by their parents, their fathers, who actually discovered their surnames in their 40s, that they actually is not their surnames. And how that has impacted them to behave differently. He's doing that job. So continue, Joshua. We support you as ULP. And also, Upo Councillor Diamond, Andil. He's not here, but he's winning. There you are. Stand up, man. This young man started at ULP as a young person, and he told me, I'm not a businessman. And I said, what are you? He said, I'm a social activist. I said, stay there. Don't follow us as business people. And now he's a councillor. So we hold him accountable to be an honest, ethical, and a competent, and he's bringing a number of young people from Windmill who are here today. So Andile, keep up the good work. Let's give him a round of applause. And bring us many young, upcoming political young people who are aspiring to become politicians, because the current politicians that we have, their season is coming to an end. Succession planning, you heard? Hey, no. I'm not talking. I'm talking succession planning. Succession planning. So let's get a lot of young people, because we talk succession planning very well in business, but we don't talk succession planning in political leadership. So we need that. Andile, please get going in that space. I'd like to thank all the ULP team. I mean, they're doing amazing work from Theo, Tsepo, Nono, Ntopo, and all the members and all the crew that is here. Thank you very much. Again, stay safe now. Remember, COVID is still around. Stay safe and stay healthy, and God bless you. Just make sure that you network now. It's dark, so don't spend too much time, and drive safely. Thank you very much.